All right, so far in this class, on assignment 6, if we go to the unit module, just to remind you, because it's brought together a lot of different skills. This was in unit 12. It was our type and poster design project, which used our spot illustration from assignment 5, added text to it, and played with layout. So 3 requirements were needed. You needed, for your finished poster, you needed a background with a border, you needed your spot illustration, and you needed type design. And the way you get credit for it is you post your black vector type, you post your color type variation, and you post your finished poster. And a lot of you have done that, which is fantastic. I'm going to show you now, if you've organized it in those ways, how you have more flexibility with your digital art, which makes it a really good skill to understand fully. It's going to take a little while to load here. So I'm going to open up my folder for it. So while I'm doing this, I'm going to move this. This is looking ahead to assignment 7. Okay. So I'm going to look at my PSD, my working file format, the most finished. This is what we finished up last class. And now it's opening in Photoshop 2026. And I did get my tablet to start working again. I just had to reinstall it. And this had all those components. But the important thing is that it has all of these components as independent layers and independent smart objects, right? So I have my spot illustration, and then I have my text. And my text is colored with layer styles. So I can see it in black, I can see it in gray, I can see it with all these different variations. All those different layer styles are making up my text. And then I have background, which I composited from some different kind of torn paper sources. And then I can also use layer styles here. And there's this overlay, there it is, kind of giving me that texture. So what happens if I turn off all the background and I only leave the text and the type? Well, this is a new spot illustration with type, right? And how would I save that in order to do things with it? Because if it works with a poster background, it's going to work independently as well. I would save it as a copy and then as a PNG. Now, there's no assignment that asks you to do a spot illustration with type. Assignment 6 was just for the spot illustration. But for your poster, you might have improved your spot illustration, right? And you might like it more with the type. So I'm going to save this one just as a spot version, right, of Karl assignment 6. And I'll save it to the desktop as a PNG with the backgrounds turned off. And I'll show you why that's interesting. I don't need to save that. Because this is the kind of thing that can then be put up to a Redbubble page, which you can find under links for the course. You can set up your own Redbubble to make products, right? And I know I showed this last class. But when it comes to those, this kind of file can become its own sticker, its own magnet, its own t-shirt design. And if it works on a poster, then it can work on any kind of t-shirt background. It can work on any kind of product background. It can work on a scarf. It can work as a pattern. It can work, on a canvas bag. So that gives you a lot of flexibility. And so if I'm selling a shirt like this, people are able to pick their own background, their own size and all of that. And all I have to worry about is that the digital image is a high enough quality and resolution and that it has an offset around it. because if you don't have an offset around it, the printing puts like this really bad looking offset around it, because in order to print on dark fabric, you have to put down a base layer of white anyway, right? And so if you don't control your offset, then it's going to look really sloppy, because it's going to match exactly where your ink is, but it's going to be a little hazy and a little weird. So that's why it's always good to have an offset around your spot illustration, and if you turn your type into a spot illustration, to add an offset around that as well. And of course, that offset just disappears when it's on a lighter fabric. So all of these things, good to understand the versatility of the digital media and the digital imaging. Now, how do we make it truly versatile? What we do is we make it ready for professional printing. And professional printing, if we go up into the assignment, is not print on demand like through Redbubble. Professional printing is made for giving just really fast, really efficient printing of lots and lots of multiples. And my usual thing is, for clients I work with, if they want more than 150 of something, then we want to do it professionally through that printing process rather than through an on-demand or fine art printing process. And that is what's called CMYK color separation. So I'm going to go through this really quickly. We need to know it for the final. We'll review it as well. It's always something students want to review. But what this is how these millions of colors that you see on the computer, there we go, all these kind of millions of pixels and all their variations, I want to get to something more colorful, how they get printed by just 3 colors and black ink on white paper. And they get turned into thousands of colors, right, that our eye can see. So it's called CMYK color separation through halftone theory, because those are the 4 inks used: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. But in order to look like more colors than just those 3 colors and black, they have to be printed in dots on top of each other that mix optically. So you can do with halftone dots, which is what is most typical, which is what I'm going to teach you, but it can be done with any kind of shape. So here it's done with little stars, or it can be done in random patterns. This is the difference. So your computer, the screens you're looking at, the projection you're looking at right now, it uses 3 colored lights to make every pixel you see. It's a red light, a green light, and a blue light. These are called the light primaries. That's why your computers are RGB monitors. Red, green, blue. When you add red light to green light to blue light, you get white light. That's full spectrum light. When you add red light and green light but no blue light, you get yellow light, right? How do we know they're light primaries? Because when you add them together, the thing you get is brighter than the things you added. So this is what's called additive color. Make sense? How do you get black? You just turn off all the lights. And so when your monitor is off, that's your dark, right? And when all 3 lights are at 100%, you get white. But the thing about light is light can be dimmed. So you can have red at 20%, green at 66%, and blue at 90%. And that will be one of the millions of colors that a computer screen can give you. Now, how do you print that? You can't print light, right? You can only project it. So to get a print, we actually have to use what are called the pigment primaries. And pigment primaries are subtractive, not additive. How do we know this? This is just in physics. So when you add cyan ink and magenta ink, you get the dark blue when they overlap. And that blue is darker than either the cyan or the magenta. When you add magenta and yellow together at 100%, you get what's called 100% red, right? And when you add cyan and yellow together at 100%, you get green. So you'll notice that the light primaries, the RGB, are the pigment secondaries. And the pigment primaries, cyan, magenta, and yellow, are the light secondaries. So that's why we use cyan instead of blue. That's why we use magenta instead of red. They're actually different on the spectrum. And then if you add all of the pigment inks together, which is just 3, cyan, magenta, and yellow, you get what's close to black, but it's not really black, right? It's more like a really muddy brown. So then for better printing, we add black ink to the cyan, magenta, and yellow. We put black on the top, and it cleans it up. All right. So now, what do these halftone dots look like? If you really look at any printing, this could be a textbook, this could be a poster, you will see these dots with a magnifying glass. Right? This is up close. And those dots create different tonalities because inks on a printing, especially professional printing, cannot be printed at different variations. You can either fill an area with ink or not. You can't fill it with 60% ink, right? So how do you turn something that's black into something that's gray just by printing? It's called halftone theory. You break up that solid black into lots of little dots that from a distance look like a gray. The closer the dots are, the darker the gray. So this is an artist that uses this color separation for animations, but doesn't use the halftone theory. So when you see the animation, you just see the colors overlapping each other, and all the colors are solid, right? So you see red, you see green, you see yellow, you see magenta, you see cyan, and you see green, right? And you see black. This is what it looks like. They're separated into these panels. And if you want to review these slides, this is the exhaustive explanation of color separation. You can see the whole process of that artist there. That helps you understand the color. Now, to get more variations than just those solid colors, we need halftone theory. We need color separation with CMYK bin Day dots, named after Benjamin Day, who widely made this popular in commercial printing in the early 20th century. So this is a very cheap, photo print with black ink on newsprint, just like newspapers are still printed today. If you use a magnifying glass, this is what it looks like. So from a distance, it looks like there's different grays, light grays, dark grays, but up close, there's only black ink. And the difference is the black ink is spread through those halftone dots. Why are they called halftone dots? Because you see that the dots are at a 45-degree angle. So like bricks in a wall, each time you go down one layer, they shift over by half. And that's why it's called halftone. But when the dots are a lot closer together, you get to blacker inks or darker grays. Once you do this with colors overlapping, you get to the full Gaussian rose and full four-color color mixing, like you see here. Black is always at 45 degrees, even when it's the only color or the only ink you're using, like for a black and white newspaper. But when you add the other halftone dots for magenta, cyan, and yellow at different angles, you get full spectrum color. So this is a professionally printed, image of digital art. And when you zoom in on it, that is what you see with the printed dots. There are other ways to color separate, like through index color, which is more like the diffusion pattern that we can get in Photoshop if we use dissolve, right? But this is the mechanical way of doing it, the halftones. So where do we mostly see it in our culture with our naked eye? When we're looking at media imagery that references kind of old printing, especially kind of old comics, which were printed this way, in a way that you could see the dots. So this is new art, again, using Wonder Woman for the primary colors, that's using halftone mixing really large, so you can see it clearly to give that kind of vintage retro feel. The Sony movies, the Into the Spider-Verse movies, use halftoning a lot in their animation style to reference old comic books. So it's just another tool in your digital imagery arsenal. And halftoning with CMYK color is even used when printing grayscale. And that will give you a much more dimensional looking gray than if you just use black ink.